Let us start with the preliminary homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Let us now pay respect to the triple gem. Arahang sama sambuddho bhagava buddhang bhagavantang abhivademi. Swakato bhagavata dhammo dhammang namasami. Supatipano bhagavato sawaka sangho sanghang namami. Let us now go for the refuge to the triple gem. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. We will now chant the observance of the 5 precepts. Panatipata veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Adinadana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Kamesu micacara veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Musawada veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Surameraya majapamadatana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Let us recollect the sublime qualities of the Buddha. Iti piso bhagava arahang sama sambuddho vijacarana sampano sugato lokavidu anutaro purisa dhammasarati satta dewa manusanang buddho bhagavati. Let us recollect the sublime qualities of Dhamma. Swakato bhagavata dhammo sanditiko akaliko ehipasiko openaiko pacatang veditabo vinyuhiti. Let us now recollect the sublime qualities of Sangha. Supatipano bhagavato sāvaka sangho. Ujjupatipano bhagavato sāvaka sangho. Nyayapatipano bhagavato sāvaka sangho. Samicipatipano bhagavato sāvaka sangho. Yadidang cattari purisa yugani atta purisa puggala esa bhagavato sāvaka sangho. Ahuneyo pahuneyo dakineyo anjali karaniyo anuttara punyaketa lokasati. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Good morning, brothers and sisters in the Dhamma. Welcome to Sunday service. Today, we are very happy to have Ajahn Achalo, all the way from Thailand, who will be giving us a talk titled Rebirth is Real, Conditions Towards the Unconditioned. Ajahn will be first leading us in a short meditation session, followed by the Dhamma talk and then Q&A. Here is a biography of Ajahn. Ajahn Achalo, the founding abbot of Wat Anandagiri in Phetchabun, Thailand, was born in Australia in 1972. He developed a keen interest in meditation at the age of 20, and a year later left for Thailand to study Buddhism more intensely. Ajahn Achalo ordained as a monk in 1996 under Ajahn Liem at Wat Pa Pong. Although most of his training has taken place in Thailand, Ajahn Achalo has also lived in several international forest monasteries in the Ajahn Chah lineage. For most of his bhikkhu life, he has considered Tan Ajahn Anan, abbot of Wat Mat Jen, to be his principal mentor. Ajahn Achalo generously shares his teachings to the world via the website www.peacebeyondsuffering.org, Insight Timer, YouTube, Zoom seminars, leading retreats, and pilgrimages, and also authored some books. Let's welcome Ajahn.
Setting the intention, we're going to be practicing breath meditation, sitting with a fairly straight posture, closing the eyes. For the first few breaths, taking a deep in-breath, bringing in fresh energy, breathing out, relaxing, breathing in, arriving fully in the moment, breathing out, putting down stress, sleepiness, fuzziness, breathing in deeply, establishing clarity. For the first few minutes, trying to know the entire in-breath in the area of the nose, chest, and abdomen. And the entire out-breath, abdomen, chest, nose, giving a broader field of awareness. Simply knowing the feelings involved with breathing, natural breath, not controlling. You can use a mental recitation to help truly be with the meditation object. Breathing in, mentally noting Buddho. Breathing out, mentally noting Buddho. Knowing the entire in-breath, knowing the entire out-breath, mentally noting Buddho, Lord Buddha, awake, aware, mindful. Using the mindfulness of breathing and the mental noting to help us to be awake, aware, mindful. If you find it easier to be aware of the breath in just one area, the nose, the chest, the abdomen, you can change to that area, still being aware of the beginning, middle, and end of each in and out breath, but looking in a more refined sphere of awareness, making the mental noting a little more spacious, breathing in Put, breathing out Do, simply knowing feelings of the natural breath, but trying to know the entire in-breath, space in between, the entire out-breath. Whatever thoughts arise, we try not to identify with them, not pick them up. Aware of a thought as a thought, not I, not mine. Breathing in Put, breathing out Do, mindful of the in and out breathing. The breath changing moment by moment, being aware of those changes, helping us to be in the body, in the present. last minute or so, just appreciating that sense of clarity, presence of mind, setting the intention to listen to Dhamma reflection with the intention of developing wisdom, insight, purifying the mind. Recollecting that meditating, coming together to listen to Dhamma produces punya, good karma. If you like, you can dedicate the merit to somebody who you know, who may need some blessing, people in your area, or all beings everywhere as you prefer. And that brings us to the end of the guided meditation. So the theme of today's talk is rebirth is real, conditions to the unconditioned. So it is a bit of a paradox in Buddhism because a lot of Buddhist practice is focused upon being present in the present moment. And people do get a bit confused about it because in a way, we try to liberate the mind from greed, hatred, and delusion, cyclic existence on a daily basis, on a moment-to-moment basis in our daily meditation and in our daily life. And it is through training ourselves to be truly present in the present moment that will eventually liberate us as we clarify that mindfulness and weaken confusion and delusion. But it is conventional reality that there is past lives. And if we aren't diligent in our practice, there are unlimited numbers of future lives as well, unfortunately. So Lord Buddha does differentiate between conventional right view and ultimate right view. In conventional right view, Lord Buddha explains that there are past lives and there is heaven, there is hell, and there is karma. Other things like having a debt of gratitude to one's parents, the appropriateness of having gratitude towards parents and teachers, etc. So, but in terms of laying the conditions, for liberation, Lord Buddha also explains when teaching people about meditation that spending too much time wondering what I was in the past and what I will be in the future is actually also an obstruction. So we need to know how to, the right amount of these kind of considerations and contemplations, partly so that we have confidence in the fact that we have to be diligent in sowing wholesome karmic causes and also be careful not to sow negative karmic causes. Once we have that in place, we understand that it's dana, generosity, sila, keeping our ethical precepts, mental cultivation, chanting, listening to Dhamma, meditating, training the mind. That's what's going to liberate us. But a samsaric perspective is helpful for that. So I thought I'd start with a few stories of things that I know. I like to share. Not everybody is in the situation of having been a bhikkhu living in Thailand for 25 years and knowing really great practitioners. So I like to share some stories that I have been privy to that illustrate some examples. So my own teacher, Ajahn, my main teacher in Thailand, when he was a little boy, when he looked at Buddha statues, when his mum took him to the temple as a 7-year-old, he would get eyes filling up with tears, with some kind of a feeling of loving the Buddha. And a little bit rare as a 7-year-old. And then at school, when there's a song that kids sing in Thai school, which is the Itipi So chant, praises to Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, translated into Thai, but it's very melodic and a bit like a folk song, very beautiful. So as a little schoolboy singing this song in praise of Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, a little boy, Anand, his hair would all stand on end, who's actually experiencing rapture, something that you experience, something that trained meditators experience. But here was a little boy called Anand singing a song at school, all of his hair standing up on his arms. And he asked his friends, "Look what's happening. Does this happen to you?" And everyone was around him was like, no, it doesn't happen to me. And so later on in his life, when he was an accountant, most of his spare time he was spending visiting monasteries, and most of his income he was spending on being generous. And he had the kind of thought, well, since I'm spending all of my spare time meditating and spending all of my money making offerings, maybe it would be better just to become a monk. So he did become a monk as quite a young man. When his mum, he visited a good number of teachers, but he visited one of Ajahn Chah's disciples in the area where he lived, and then he decided to go and visit Luang Por Chah. Luang Por Chah was still alive and well and teaching. So he went with his mum. And when he met Luang Por Chah asked his mother, "How many sons do you have?" I believe she had 3. And he asked his mum, "Do you mind if I have this one? Can I have this? Can I have this one?" So I would deduce from that Luang Por Chah had seen something special. He's asking, "I'm going to take this one as my own son." And so it's my belief, understanding that Ajahn Achalo was probably born as a stream enterer. So someone who is a stream enterer will have a quality of unshakable faith in Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. They will have a lot of hiriyottapa, conscience, wise fear of wrongdoing. So he's a very virtuous and generous person, basically from childhood, and a very sensitive mind, responding to things related to Buddha's practice with rapture. And so when he began to meditate as a layman, he experienced jhana samadhi, something that most people really, really want to experience something of. And so here is lots of retreats and decades of practice, and a lot of people still not experiencing regular samadhi, but Ajahn Achalo did attain to jhana samadhi as a layman. And so a few things that indicate, my point in telling this story is there are certain examples where it becomes clear. This person has practiced before. That's why progressing in practice was easier and faster. A lot of practice had been done. Ajahn Achalo, I haven't spent a lot of time with Ajahn Achalo, but I did spend 1 month living with him many years ago. And he was a good friend of Ajahn Achalo. They were practicing together. Luang Por Biak, Ajahn Achalo were practicing together at Ajahn Chah's monastery, and then they helped Luang Por Biak establish a monastery outside of Bangkok, practicing there for a period of years. Ajahn Achalo had fallen in love as a young man, before he was a monk. And then he came to meditate. And something very interesting happened. He's meditating, and he's not deliberately or intentionally doing this, but he saw the image of the beautiful woman that he'd fallen in love with before him. And he saw the flesh on her face begin to rot and fall off, so that there was a skeleton, rotting flesh and skeleton. And the feelings of, I love this woman, I can't live without her, fell away. And a lot of people, I know a lot of monks really struggle with lust and with phenomenon of falling in love, and many of them fall away and try relationships after some time. And so this kind of really trying to see human bodies by the nature of being of the nature to die, become bloated corpses, and for there only to be left skeleton is something that, monks actually try to cultivate, because it helps them maintain a celibate life and it helps them stick to being a monk for a lifetime. So Ajahn done without even setting the intention. When he'd fallen in love, when he came to meditation practice, these things happened automatically, but that has to have a cause. So I would deduce that Ajahn Done in past lives had been diligent with his nature of the body meditation, so that when he came to this life and born in a Buddhist kingdom, started his meditation practice, that those old results manifested very quickly. There's another story, of course, of the Dalai Lama's mother. Now, it's important to understand that the Dalai Lama's mother didn't know that the Dalai Lama was in her womb. She was a poor farmer in a remote part of Tibet. But when this consciousness came into her womb, she could hear the fetus inside reciting mantras. So she didn't know there was a Lama inside her, but she could hear Omni Bami, 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 Omni Bami. So the great Bodhisattva was thinking, yeah, I finally get a 9-month retreat, I go, nobody's going to bother me. I get some time to myself. And the Bodhisattva was doing his meditation. So when beings become particularly developed, the Bodhisattva practitioners get very powerful, very developed minds. So they are actually mindful as they die, mindful in the intermediate state, and mindful as Lord Buddha explains that. Actually, it's a sutra in the Majjhima Nikaya. I think it's called Wonderful and Marvelous, where Ananda is talking to some bhikkhus, and the Buddha passes by in Savatthi and asks them, what were you talking about? And Ananda says, I was talking about how Lord Buddha told me that mindful and fully aware he descended from Tushita heaven, mindful and fully aware he entered the womb of his mother. And then Lord Buddha says, okay, continue, Ananda. What are other wonderful and marvelous things? And he talks about the qualities, the special qualities of our Bodhisattva who became a Buddha. And I think the sutta ends with a classic wisdom teaching. And remember this also, Ananda. The Buddha, when feelings arrive, the Buddha is mindful and fully aware as they arise and cease. When thoughts arise, the Buddha is fully aware as they arise and cease. And when basically the Buddha is aware of the 4 foundations of mindfulness arising and ceasing. So it's within that teaching, it's very interesting. It's a short teaching, but it has conventional and ultimate reality contained within it. And Lord Buddha is saying it is marvelous, it is wonderful that the Bodhisattva is so developed that he can be mindful and fully aware as he enters a womb. But what is just as marvelous and wonderful is that the Buddha is fully mindful of things as they are all the time. And that was probably a little bit of an admonishment to Ananda to finish his work, because at the time he was a stream enterer, but he wasn't yet fully liberated. So I just wanted to give a few stories. And recently in my life, something interesting has happened. a layman who has an affection for dogs asked me what kind of dog I would like for the monastery, because he sometimes breeds purebreds and trains purebreds. And I said, well, the kind of dog I like is actually a cat. Because we actually have I like dogs too. We have lots of dogs that pass through the monastery. But if we actually had a monastery dog, and they don't bark, you see, and I like that. But if we had because they're territorial, if I had a monastery dog, every dog that passed through the monastery dog would bark at it. And then you have barking in the monastery all day and all night. So I don't want that. I like a monastery without barking. But I do have an affection for Siamese cats, and I have kind of thought a few times in the last 5 years, I'd like a Siamese cat. I'm living in Siam, And so he asked me, what kind of dog? I said, well, I like a cat. And he did a quick search on Facebook, and he showed me, oh, look, this one is a Siamese cat mixed with a Persian cat. And it's 8 weeks old today, can be separated from its mum. And his driver was coming up from Bangkok on that day. And so within 12 hours of when he asked what kind of dog I wanted, the monastery had a new cat, which is a Siamese Persian cross. But what's very interesting about this cat is everybody likes it. Everybody likes this cat. And so it's not that much of a burden for me to take care of, because if I leave, there's people queuing up. Can I take care of the cat? The people want to come in to my guest receiving room and cuddle the cat and change the kitty litter and feed the cat and take the cat to the vet. And so recently the cat got some mold growing on it because it's so damp here in the wet season, needed to go to the vet. And the cat just sits quietly on the chair next to the driver. It doesn't kind of crawl around meowing. It doesn't get anxious. It just sits there peacefully. And so I did ask a teacher that I know who has special abilities, why do I feel like I want to take care of this cat? Like, I like this cat. Why do I like this cat, and why do I want to take care of it? And he says, well, this cat has merit. This cat has merit. So, well, what happened? He says, so this cat was a human being in its last life, and apparently really liked fish. This guy really liked fish, and he was a villager, and he stole someone else's fish. But a portion of the fish that he stole, he cooked up and he offered to the monks in the monks' bowls the next day. So here you have this combination of got born as a cat because he broke the precepts and liked fish, but he's being taken care of in a monastery because he also made merit. So hopefully, I don't know if I can teach the cat not to kill beings this lifetime. It might be hard, but you can see. I tried to introduce this cat to the other cats, and the other cats, they're kind of intuitively scared of it. I think it has a kind of a presence of mind, and the cat's kind of fluffy and cute. But the other cats wouldn't come near it, and kind of jumped out of the building where they usually stay, and they're staring in through the window at this cat, like, what is that? So anyway, it can go, obviously beings can evolve and de-evolve. If we make merits, we go on an upwards trajectory. But if we break our precepts and make bad karma, we can go on a downwards trajectory. So that was just a little bit about some anecdotal contemporary stories of masters who obviously laid significant causes in past lives. With regards how we must cultivate to liberate our minds. That's the Eightfold Path. So the Eightfold Path is also karmic. Basically, this is cultivating the wholesome spectrum of karma, right thought, right speech, right livelihood, right action. It's all karma. When we check our intention, we meditate, we develop clarity, we develop presence of mind so that we can be aware of our thoughts. When we start to be consistently aware of our thoughts, then it becomes possible to be clearer on our intentions and to make sure we keep setting a wholesome intention. But for many people, it's like we have to take quite a few steps backwards to get to that point. We can't start with being mindful of our thoughts and our intentions straight away. There's the power of ignorance and habits and delusion and confusion. And oftentimes when people come to meditation, we are kind of a slave to our habits. And so we have to be diligent in establishing new habits. And what regular meditators notice is that, whereas in the past you might be reactive and get angry and start saying something, as you meditate more frequently, you notice halfway through, you know where this is going, you know that this doesn't help anything. Just stop, and you can stop yourself, and you continue to meditate, and you might be just starting to say the angry reactive thing to the person who pushes your button, and it's like blah, 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 and you're like, no, don't do that. Or it might be the case where there is a conflict or there's a challenging person, and it really is appropriate to say something to this person, and whereas in the past you might just get a head full of steam and just go and tell them because they need to hear this and they deserve it. You're full of justification of why you need to tell your boss this, or why you need to tell your husband or wife this. When you develop more mindfulness, presence of mind, reflective skills and nuance, you begin to be able to ask yourself, what would be the right way to say it? What would be the right time to say it? If I said it, would it be beneficial? So it's like extra clarity begins to be established around the way you experience your body and mind and relationships, and you begin to have more choices. And but essentially we have to commit ourselves to a daily meditation practice, and preferably at least twice a day. But obviously for beginners, you have to start at once a day. If you can slowly increase it to twice a day, what you'll notice is that sense of clarity and sense of presence of mind becomes more consistent, and you become more aware of what you're thinking and what you're saying and what you do. And when you come to meditate, you become more aware of your thoughts, your thought habits. If you did something unskillful, you'll tend to feel bad about it. In the past, you might not have noticed that you felt bad. But you come to meditate and you start to realize. Now, for myself, when I first began Buddhist practice, I had a lot of faith in meditation practice. I had a lot of faith in Lord Buddha. That was interesting. For myself as a Westerner, I did a 10-day meditation retreat, Goenka retreat, and I had some peaceful experiences. And I basically developed faith in Lord Buddha, his teachings and meditation. I wasn't yet convinced about the 5 precepts as a 21-year-old. I was like, well, that might just be some kind of archaic Indian idea about morality. I think it's okay to get drunk every now and then. I think if I want to have sex and the other person wants to have sex, I think that's okay. That's probably where young hedonistic people in Western societies start. Of course, when I traveled to Thailand and I was doing meditation retreats and I was making more efforts with precepts, I started to notice that, no, actually, when I break a precept, the sense of clarity, the sense of presence of mind is actually damaged, and begin to weigh the benefits that actually the mind was, because the kilesas, they lie to us. They'll say, you just do this just once and you'll feel better. And you go and do it. If it's against the precepts, you go and do it, and you might get some pleasure, but afterwards you don't feel better. Breaking precepts actually affects that sense of presence of mind, and it affects your confidence and dignity. So you might be able to justify, we justify reasons why we might be able to break them or should be allowed to break them. But when you have truth discerning awareness, presence of mind, and you're paying attention and being truthful to yourself, you will notice that when you break them afterwards, you don't feel good about it. So I had to acknowledge, somewhat reluctantly, as a 22-year-old, hey, guess what? Looks like Lord Buddha knew what he was talking about. The 5 precepts are actually important. They do support meditation practice. And when I break them, clarity is less. And when I keep them consistently, the mind is more likely to experience peaceful meditation states. And Lord Buddha explains that peace is the highest happiness. So you can get fleeting sensual pleasures and you can have peak sensual experiences, but that's what it is. It's a pleasure that is fleeting. and it kind of has a bitter aftertaste and conditions craving for the next one. And then you always have to go higher. It's somewhat addictive. Once you get used to a certain pleasure, you need more of it. You need something more exciting. But with meditation, the contentment and peacefulness and well-being that you feel deepens with practice, and there's no bitter aftertaste from having a 20-minute period of feeling contented and full and peaceful and serene. If we are diligent and consistent, then it deepens and deepens. But as I was saying, we have to establish the meditation habit, because that is what's going to establish clarity and presence of mind, truth discerning awareness. And then we can get to the point where we can start to be aware of our intentions before we speak, before we act. Change our intentions if it's unwholesome. Establish a wholesome intention. Be careful with even our thoughts and our speech and our actions, because it's the being very diligent in cultivating kusala karma, wholesome karmas, and being very diligent in restraining the akusala, the unwholesome karmas. This is Lord Buddha explains that his teachings lead to heaven and beyond. So in a way, we have to train ourselves to be angel-like, deva-like. That's what, in our behavior, that's what leads to heaven. And it's once you have if you're consistently generous, consistently ethical, meditate frequently, you will have a human body, but a deva's mind. And it's with this foundation of a deva's mind, that's the mind that is ripe for insight. So it's when we have these foundations, regular practice, generosity, the merit that comes from being virtuous, a metta practice, various things. Lord Buddha explains the mind that has loving kindness concentrates easily. A mind that concentrates easily is a mind that can be applied to investigation, or is more easily to notice arising and cessation, having insights into impermanence, not self, etc. So we need to try to establish our mind at first to be genuinely human being. That's keeping the 5 precepts and being ethical and being a good person. As we deepen our practice, actually, the mind is the mind of a deva. So you may experience, when you're chanting, feelings of rapture, listening to Dharma talks, a great gladness, joy that comes from listening to Dharma talks. And then when we really start to feel grateful for Lord Buddha and what he gave us in laying down this path and practice and all these teachings and skillful ways of explaining things, helping us to come out of our confusion. When we really get that, we start to feel tremendous gratitude to Lord Buddha and those teachers whose teachings we resonate with, who have helped us. We can think of them, and then the mind can, your eyes can weep with joy, and you can just feel. For myself, when I go to, one of the reasons I love to go and practice in Bodhgaya is just looking at the Bodhi tree and looking at the Vajrasana and thinking of what the Bodhisattva did and what he accomplished there. I can gladden and make my mind very bright and very happy. And with that foundation of rapture, gladness, gratitude, faith, respect, love, all of these wholesome qualities, then it's possible to meditate 10 hours a day quite easily, because you have this. I've done a lot of that in Bodhgaya. 10 6-week retreats many, many years ago, starting with 6 hours meditation a day, working up to 8 hours. In recent years, 10 hours meditation a day for 6 weeks. But it's that foundation of gratitude, love. The mind might get a bit kind of grumpy, or a lot of noise, or bad smells, or insects, or heat. Open your eyes, look at the Bodhi tree. Think of what Lord Buddha accomplished under the Bodhi tree, how much effort he put into that. Then this rapture and gratitude comes up again, and it's easy to continue to practice. So this is this, when the mind becomes like the mind of a deva, we are able to put forth a lot of energetic discipline in cultivating the meditation, so that we have insight. So that in terms of liberating ourselves from samsara, it's these conditions that we have to develop, bring to fruition. Mindfulness, probably one of the most important conditions, because when teaching the Anapanasati Sutta, Lord Buddha explains in the first paragraph that in practicing mindfulness of in and out breath, it's possible to cultivate the 4 foundations of mindfulness, just with this one meditation practice. And you can see why, because you come to sit. The feelings of the breath are occurring within the body, within the sphere of the body. So you can be mindful of the body sitting. And then feelings, the feelings of the breath, mindful of feelings, whatever pain arises in the body, whatever itches, tingling, etc. Noticing these things. And then you're trying to be mindful of the breath and thoughts come up. So it's like, I want to be mindful of the breath. We're establishing this clarity, but there's this thought about the past, there's this thought about the future, there's this thought associated with craving, there's this thought associated with irritation. And so sitting there trying to be mindful of the breath with a little bit more presence of mind, you begin to become you begin to notice and become mindful of wholesome dharmas, unwholesome dharmas, neutral dharmas. And you just continue to put more and more effort into your practice. And what do you notice? You notice that they arise and they cease. They arise and they cease. With things that arise and cease, you can ask yourself, is it appropriate to consider this I, mine, self? In others, is it them? Is it a self? And you meditate more and more, cultivating mindfulness, then you develop insight as well as calm and peace. So Lord Buddha explains in the Anapanasati Sutta that through cultivating Anapanasati, mindfulness of in and out breathing, one can develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness fully. And in cultivating the 4 foundations of mindfulness fully, the 7 factors of enlightenment are brought to fruition or completion. And in bringing the 7 factors of enlightenment to fulfillment, completion, the mind is liberated. So it's very clear in that one sutra, in that one paragraph, that if we do this practice enough, but what he's pointing to is that it's the mindfulness, it's this quality of mindfulness. This was also one of Lord Buddha's contemplations under the Bodhi tree in the 7 weeks that he was doing various absorptions in his liberation as well as contemplations of Dhamma. So one of those weeks he was sitting under a tree in the vicinity and he had the insight. These 4 foundations of mindfulness, when cultivated, when made much of, lead to the deathless and merge in the deathless meaning nibbana. The thing to understand, however, is that mindfulness is a condition, but it is one of the most important conditions that will take the mind to the place where it begins to glimpse the unconditioned. So mindfulness has this nature of knowing, and it will know greed, and then you can put it down. Know irritation and aversion, put it down. This is, mindfulness joined with right effort, the effort to abandon, the effort to increase, the effort to maintain, etc. So mindfulness, good mindfulness, knowing the wholesome, knowing the unwholesome, knowing the neutral. Eventually, mindfulness is what's going to know nibbana, ultimate truth. And it will begin to glimpse it in moments and then begin to have experiences of it. And then once the mind knows ultimate truth, a lot of ignorance and delusion falls away from the mind. And the mind knows for itself ultimate truth. But the point we have to consider is, in order for our mindfulness to be good, because everybody has mindfulness, but most people's mindfulness is a bit fuzzy, scattered, challenged, good at times, not good at other times. So understanding that mindfulness is one of the most important conditions that leads us to the unconditioned, then we have to consider what are the factors that support good mindfulness. And that's where it comes back to dana again, being generous. Being generous works against our tendency towards acquisitiveness and stinginess. It also trains, that's the root kilesas of greed, hatred, and delusion, right? So one of them is greed. A lot of energy, a lot of darkness in the mind associated with greed. So when we practice in relinquishing, practice in letting go, some of the darkness of the acquisitiveness and the greed is getting weakened. We're training the mind to put it down. And then the merit brightens the mind. So we're dropping some of the darkness and we're bringing in a quality which is brightening. Ethical precepts, restraining the coarser forms of greed and hatred, that also brightens the mind. And the generosity practice is directly linked. This is something that people don't realize. It's not, some people realize, but we all, I think, could benefit from considering this a bit more deeply. We don't just be generous because it's nice. We don't just be generous because it produces good karma. We be generous because we are training ourselves to relinquish things, to put things down. So a lot of people want to get enlightened, and it's kind of a bit more spiritual materialism. And what we need to understand is that enlightenment is probably more about what you've had this enough spiritual power to be able to put down, what you've been able to relinquish. So being generous trains us to put things down that we want, that we like. It's not that we don't want them. It's not that we don't like them, but we're putting them down because we want something better. Lord Buddha explains that peace is the highest happiness, nibbana is the highest bliss. That's what we want. So we have to force ourselves to give away stuff that we like, stuff that we want, because we want something better than that. We see the danger. Lord Buddha has these wonderful brief teachings which are very pithy with regard to samsara. See the pleasure, know the danger, cultivate the escape. So when we know the pleasure, I like brownies, I like carrot cake, I like amber malas, but I like my new kitten. But if you like things a lot and you don't train yourself in giving things away, so then you have no choice but to be reborn, because that's the danger. It's like the attachment to the samsara is coming from our craving, our attachment to the pleasure that can be had within cyclic existence. And there's also the negative attachments, like things that we hate and irritate us. That's a negative attachment, but it's attachment. So when we're practicing generosity, we're training ourselves to put down some of our attachment. This is what trains and supports the faculty in meditation to be able to put down a hindrance. Training this faculty of the mind to drop it, let it go of your attachment to it, let go of your identification to it. The merit also brightens the mind, all of these things, supportive factors. The Lord Buddha's system of training is very sophisticated, very marvelous, very miraculous, that just understanding that this simple practice of being generous, giving some of your time, giving you some of your resources, giving away things that you really like every now and then, is training you in your meditation to be able to let go of those sticky thoughts, those sticky reactions, those moods that you get attached to, the grudge that you're still hanging on to. The thing that's going to help you to let go of that is your generosity practice, as well as your consistent meditation, which makes your mindfulness strong enough. And similar with the precepts, you have to let go of your desires, don't you? I really, really want to do this, but it's against the precept. Okay, well, you can't do it. So you have to relinquish the desire. The desire doesn't go away just because you've decided you're not going to do it. This is where patient endurance gets developed. You have to sit and patiently endure until the desire falls away. And this is also developing more spiritual power, capacity to sit with mind states until they cease. What happens when you can sit with mind states until they cease? You can notice them arising and ceasing. But if you believe a mind state, oh, I just have to say this person irritated me so much, they've really got it coming to them, I'm going to go and give them a piece of my mind, and you go and say it. Well, then you're not going to see that mood, if you just sat for another hour, would have fallen away by itself. And that whole feeling of I just have to tell this person just goes away by itself. It might come back the next day when you think about it again, what they said that irritated you. But again, if you just sit with it, it will pass away. So enormous benefits come from regular meditation, and on the foundation of generosity, ethics, frequent meditation, we begin to have the integrity of the mindfulness that is going to glimpse the deathless. Mindfulness, when cultivated, made much of, leads to the deathless and merges in the deathless. So what I wanted to emphasize, however, is that it's a karmic condition. So just as past lives are a condition for this life, and this life is a condition for future lives, mindfulness is the condition for ending rebirth. But we have to bring that condition to fruition. We have to make that particular condition very powerful. And the way to do that is through being generous, being ethical, meditating a lot, listening to Dharma, chanting, studying, etc. I offer that for your reflection. I did want to give people the opportunity to ask questions as well.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We have about 11 questions from different people. Sis Shishuen, can you start?
Yeah, we have a long list of questions.
Okay,
So
start.
Okay, so the first question, Ajahn, is, if one does not believe in karma and rebirth, does it affect the progress of our Dharma journey?
Yes. I mean, if it's Buddha Dharma that a person is practicing, you cannot take out karma and rebirth. If you don't have karma and rebirth in your Buddha Dharma, it's not Buddha Dharma. So I don't know what Dharma this person is studying, but if it doesn't have karma and rebirth in it, it's not Buddha Dharma. And if you don't believe in rebirth, in a way, if you don't believe in rebirth, what's the point of aspiring for Nibbana? You would just try to squeeze as much pleasure as you possibly could out of this life. It's if there's no consequences. So I can't see. I mean, if I thought there wasn't rebirth and karma, if I really thought that when this body died that was it, I wouldn't be a celibate monk.
You, Ajahn.
Yeah.
Okay, the second question is, what kind of actions give rise to neither dark nor bright karma, and how do they lead to the end of karma and rebirth?
So yes, our teachers, Luang Por Chah, Ajahn Achalo, they do often say, keep the mind in the middle is a very pithy part of practice. But people are going to assume that keeping the mind in the middle is neutral. Keeping in the mind in the middle is actually extremely wholesome. So it's not the neutral karmas that lead us to liberation. It's the wholesome karmas that lead us to liberation, particularly bright mental states, bright mental faculties. But it's a tricky, it requires some nuance and sophistication to understand that keeping your mind in a somewhat ordinary state is producing merit, because you're not allowing it to be swayed by liking and disliking. It requires effort. It requires presence of mind. There are subtle mental faculties present at work. If you don't have those, you are going to be swayed into liking and disliking. So to stay in the middle, and there's another teacher, if you really want to get enlightened, the fastest way is to just do nothing. It's another teaching Ajahn Chah gave Ajahn Achalo. It's very easy to say, try and do it. Try to simply keep your mind still and not be swayed by your moods and not be swayed by reactivity. And then you'll realize, okay, this is actually a very hard practice to just do nothing. So keeping the mind in the middle, not being swayed by liking and disliking, weakens greed, weakens aversion. It also weakens delusion, because you are developing an awareness of moods and not following them. And it's the beginning of one of the Brahma Viharas of equanimity. Equanimity, a lot of people misunderstand equanimity. They think disinterest, they think nothing. Equanimity is nothingness. It's like, no. Equanimity is equipoise, balance, immovability. Equanimity is a profound quality which really requires a really amazing sense of presence of mind to stay equanimous. It's a very, very, very beautiful experience. Equanimity in its purest state is the fourth jhana. So it's a more concentrated and profound type of samadhi than the first, second, and third jhana, because what happens in the jhanic absorptions is there's intense rapture, intense tranquility, intense serenity. And as the mind has to let go of the bliss, really, really quite amazing and profound bliss, to just abide in a state of pure presence. And that pure presence of mind starves the roots of the craving for and craving not for. So oftentimes when people attain to stream entry, they have to spend a lot of time in the fourth jhana, because that's what starves the greed and the hatred to the point that they attain to the higher sakadagami, non-returner, ameliorated greed and hatred, anagami, no more greed, no more hatred. But it was the fourth jhana that helps to bring that to fruition, as well as deepening insight. So keeping the mind in the middle and having what appear to be neutral states, balanced states, is actually producing great, vast merits and laying the foundation to have pure equanimity, which will help you purify your mind of all greed, hatred, and delusion. So.
Thank you, Ajahn, for the answer. The next question is from the floor. Someone is asking whether reincarnation is possible.
So in Buddhism, for the ordinary being, we would talk about rebirth. Rebirth is somewhat automatic for people with not yet very developed spiritual powers. So most people don't have much control over their rebirth. What will affect your rebirth is the general level of that the mind has had throughout its life. So if a person hasn't kept the 5 precepts for most of their life, the mind has actually been inhabiting an animal realm or a ghost realm. When they die, the chances are very, very likely that automatically they will fall to a lower realm. There's no God deciding where you go. It's the karma that you made. It's the vibration that your mind has been inhabiting. It's like if you have had an animal mind state most of your life, you are going to an animal realm. That's a rebirth. If you've been mostly human, got a bit grumpy sometimes, got a bit Deva-like sometimes, being generous, then probably you'll go to a human realm. It's when a person begins to develop spiritual power, these 5 spiritual powers, or the iddhipadas, the 4 bases of success, various lists that we can refer to. But basically, once a spiritual practitioner's mind begins to have more power, well, then a lot of people make aspirations throughout their life. Due to this merit, may I be born. So if a person has done that a lot, meditated, dedicated the merit with a specific goal, made offerings, the mind was glad and bright, and in that moment when the mind was glad and bright and powerful, dedicated merit in a specific goal. So if a person has done that tens of times, hundreds of times, thousands of times, tens of thousands of times over a lifetime, well, that person might reincarnate according to their aspiration. And then for a person who is a truly developed spiritual practitioner, a person who is on the path of great discipleship or Buddhahood or Bodhisattvahood, those beings, once they get significantly established, if a person has jhana samadhi, for example, they come out of that jhana samadhi and then they set the intention, the type of situation they would like to be born in. Yes, that's making a very, very deep imprint that will help guide the mind at that moment of death. Those adhitanas, we call them, it's a determination barami, adhitana barami. We use that in our practice. We have to be determined. But you also make determinations. You dedicate merits in a particular way, and you make determinations that you want to be born in such and such a situation. So you can see that in Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about that more than in other forms of Buddhism, where these great reincarnated lamas in the last periods of their life will already be considering where they're going to be reborn, and they might say a few things to some close disciples to give them a hint where to try to look for them. So those kind of practitioners actually have remarkable ability about choosing exactly where they get reborn and exactly when. So, yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn. The next question is slightly unique. How do relics come about? How and why do they grow and multiply?
So relics are an interesting thing. And it's important to remember that before Lord Buddha passed away, he asked Ananda if Ananda knew what to do when he was passed away, and Ananda didn't yet know what to do. And so Lord Buddha says, well, there will be this Brahman, such and such a Brahman, who will know exactly what to do. So when I go and pass away into final Nibbana in Kusinara, consult with this Brahman, because this Brahman knows what is the appropriate way to dispose of the body of a wheel-turning monarch or a Buddha. And it was quite detailed, having to wrap the body in cloth that was soaked in oil certain numbers of times and then put in a barrel. And it was quite a very specific instruction that led to there being quite a good number of relics when the body had been. And then Lord Buddha, having the wisdom that he had, Ananda was upset because the Buddha was being born in some kind of back of the boonies, nowhere town. He called it a wattle and daub town. What was really important was that it was a kind of a neutral, a bit like Switzerland. It was a kind of a neutral state that didn't have a strong allegiance with any nation state. And so what happened was all of these kings, warrior kings, who loved the Buddha, unfortunately, they had a lot of attachment with their love and respect. They sent their emissaries, we demand the relics, give us the relics or we'll go to war with this kingdom. And so the Buddha knew this was going to happen. And so they set portions for each of these kingdoms. So each emissary of each kingdom could go back and the king could build a chedi in honor of the Buddha. But the Buddha did say that his relics should be interred in chedis and people should pay respects to them, because when they do, it would be for their benefit for a long, long, long time. So when Lord Buddha says paying respects to relics of an enlightened being is of benefit to the person who does it for a long, long, long time, I think that's something that we have to pay attention to. And this is in the realm of things that you can't see with your physical eyes. But what I believe occurs, and I've discussed it with my own teachers as well, is that Lord Buddha, having spent all those hundreds of thousands of eons becoming the Buddha, produced enormous amounts of merit. And then when Lord Buddha's mind goes to Mahaparinibbana, merit is a condition. Lord Buddha's mind is established in the unconditioned. But the merit is still a thing which can still benefit people. So what I think happens is that a certain amount of this accumulated positive karmic energy sticks to the earth element. And if a person has a divine eye, they will see enormous radiant light around that little bit of earth element. This is why throughout the millennia, great monks have been able to see, oh, this is a real relic, and they'll build a chedi or a stupa for it, because when they close their eyes and go into meditation, they see it and it's like, wow, vast merits of the Buddha in this little thing. And then they want to build a great stupa to it, and people come and offer flowers and circumambulate and chant. And when you meditate, one of the things I notice is that if I meditate at a chedi that has a bona fide Buddha relic, my mind will become more peaceful more easily and will experience more rapture. So something's there which is supporting and helping that, keeping in mind that the Buddha made his merit specifically with the intention of helping people develop their minds and get liberated. So how do they multiply? How do they come? I think this is the devas. There are devas who take care of relics. If a person knows how to relate to relics skillfully, devas might bring more to them. To keep in mind that in various Buddhist kingdoms, there's been periods where the kingdom flourished. There were a lot of Buddhist practitioners, but then of course Buddhism degenerates, or there's an invading army and Buddhism is destroyed, but there's still all these relics in these chedis. So devas can take those relics from those chedis and bring them to people who will appreciate them or know how to take care of them, because the devas will be able to see the radiance of the relic with their divine eye. I think sometimes the reason they multiply may not be because the deva brings them, but it's like the merit itself simply just sticks to a bit more earth element that it takes from the ether, from the air. So it's like there's so much merit there. And Lord Buddha this is what I think is occurring, which people can't see. the power of the Buddha's determinations before he went to Nibbana, that there will be relics, that his merit will stick to earth element in ways that become relics so that people can pay respects to them, so that it is of their benefit for a long time to come. So yes, and it's similar with the great disciples and with arahants. But from what one of my teachers told me, Ajahn Achalo, if a person has jhana, and if a person contemplates body parts, so they're using their concentrated samadhi to be mindful of muscles as muscles, and the mind becomes one-pointed on it.
Recording in progress.
Blood as blood, and the mind becomes concentrated on that, and things like that, then the earth element gets purified by the samadhi of the person with the jhana. So jhana enough, if the meditation object has been body parts, will produce relics when the body is burnt. It's something that's a bit difficult to understand. I don't know, in terms of the science of it, it's a bit difficult to understand. But in terms of anecdotal evidence, great monks, Buddhas, great practitioners, when they burn their bodies, they leave relics. Relics are found in the ashes in a way that doesn't occur for beings that don't have samadhi. But just having jhana samadhi is enough. And I remember when I was having relics enshrined, I know some monks with some divine eye special abilities, and one of these monks is looking and says, oh yes, this was an arahant. Oh yes, this was an Aryan. This was someone with jhana, but not yet an Aryan. This was a cave-dwelling rishi with good samadhi, but he wasn't enlightened yet. Oh, this is a previous Buddha. Oh, this is a great disciple. And they really could see the different energies and blessings associated. We just put them all in, not in different vessels, but all in the same chedi. So there's relics of practitioners with jhana, there's relics of great disciples, there's relics of contemporary arahants, there's relics of Buddhas, there's relics of this Buddha and previous Buddhas. And there was even a different type where this monk was looking and said, oh, this relic contains the happiness of devas. The devas have relinquished some of their jewels in the form of this relic, and it contains merit and happiness. The devas want to put something in the chedi. They want to make merit. So what they're giving up their jewels and some of their merit in the form of this particular type of relic, but this relic contains the happiness of devas. So lots of good stuff in the Anandagiri chedi. Lots of good stuff in lots of chedis. And it's why many people find that when they meditate in their chedis, the mind becomes more peaceful more easily. Not everyone has that experience, but many people do.
Thank you,
Ajahn,
Ajahn.
Ajahn, does that mean relics will also disappear besides appearing?
Yeah, it's interesting. If a person doesn't take care of them, they can disappear. And sometimes even if a person does take care of them. But I have one student who had a little image of the Emerald Buddha blessed by Lumpur Tate, I think it was. And she had a look one day and she saw that all these relics had formed over this little metal statue. And then she showed Ajahn Achalo, and Ajahn Achalo said, well, those are Buddha relics. So Lumpur Tate had somehow been able to attract some of the Buddha's merit, put it in the image, and then some earth element just kind of coalesced and became Buddha relics. So, yeah. But they do. I have heard stories of people very excitedly going to see if their relics have multiplied and discovering that their relic is no longer there. I have interesting karma. I had the kind of karma where lots of people offered me relics when I was making my chedi, really good ones, hundreds and hundreds, and thousands actually. But I never had a relic self-manifest, but several of my students did. And I was saying to Ajahn Achalo, it's weird, isn't it? I'm like building this chedi and I've been a monk. Why doesn't some relics just manifest? Because they have for Ajahn Achalo also. And Ajahn Achalo said, don't be greedy for merit. He said, you get the merit of building the chedi. The devas want the lay people to get the merit of relinquishing their relic. I say, okay.
Thank you, Ajahn. The next question is also very unique. What karma should we do to be born as a dragon? What realms do Nagas, Gandhabas, and Garudas belong to?
So I can't speak from the position of absolutely knowing, but I can offer some suggestions. So I believe the Naga realm, there's 3 types of Nagas. So there's Nagas born in water, and there's Nagas born from eggs. And if a person can see such a Naga, they will look like an ordinary snake. They're in a parallel realm, but they will look like a snake, often quite big. Then there's the Naga that's born in water, and that's the one that looks more like the ones at temple gates in Thailand, the green ones with pointy heads and jewels. So that's pointy-headed Nagas. But then a dragon is most probably the Naga that is born spontaneously in the air. And the reason Nagas are born in different forms is because of different levels of merit and particularly different levels of samadhi. So but not always, because sometimes a Naga with great merit might choose to be born as a Naga so that he can be a Naga king and lead the Nagas in producing merits. That also happens. You do get Nagas with a lot of barami and a lot of merit. And so but in general, the Nagas born spontaneously in the air have more samadhi and more merit, and that is what you would call a dragon. So that's probably in the realm of the 4 kings still, Chatu Maharaja, but different levels of merit in that realm. And I think the dragons, if they have enough merit, they can visit the Tushita heaven also. So they can fly at the speed of mind, so they can go and attend teachings of bodhisattvas in Tushita heaven, etc. So, I mean, not everybody believes in this stuff, but if you do believe in this stuff, it can be inspiring or interesting. I guess, a lot of Chinese people believe dragons are lucky, so obviously they have great merit. So if a dragon comes, they can spread metta to you, they can help your projects be successful, they can spread metta and blow away some of the obstructions, things like that. So I don't know if one should aspire to be born as a dragon. And I think what I would recommend is that one, because it's not possible from my understanding it might be different. It's not possible for Nagas to attain to liberating insight because the realm is so rapturous and sensual and fast and magical that the mind finds difficulty becoming still enough to have penetrative insight. They can practice samatha, they can chant, they can rejoice, they can develop Brahma Viharas, but to have vipassana insight is difficult for the Nagas. I don't know if it is difficult for the dragons because they have more samadhi. I don't know. But what I recommend is for people to aspire to be born in the ideal situation where they will meet with Dharma and practice Dharma, be inclined to practice Dharma, meet with the Buddha's teachings, meet with experienced practitioners. That's what I recommend. So, and if in one particular point in the eon it's auspicious to be born as a dragon and you will meet with the Dharma and you can hear Dharma teachings, then fine, if that's what happens, if it manifests that way. But if in general, I like to encourage people to make that aspiration. May I be born in a situation where I will meet with the Buddha's teachings, preferably a Buddha. Okay, plan A. Plan B, may I meet with the Buddha's teachings, experienced practitioners under auspicious circumstances where I can practice. And then and set the resolution, and I will practice in all lives until liberation. You have to set that determination.
Thank you, Ajahn. The next question is, how does knowing rebirth help our practice?
I think in the initial stages, just believing in the probability of it is enough. So we take it on as, okay, this is probable, this is likely. There's enormous amounts of anecdotal evidence. The sutras contain fairly consistent reference to it. Lord Buddha talks about his own past lives, the past lives of the great disciples, etc. He also talks of the destination of beings when they pass away very consistently throughout the sutras. So we can take it on trust, if we trust the Buddha, The same Buddha that gave us the wisdom teachings, the meditation methods, the same Buddha is talking about past lives and future lives. So we would take it on as something very likely and probable. In terms of refining the insight, probably after stream entry, I do believe it is the case that the monks who are able to review their past lives, because what are you going to see? You're going to see birth, aging, associated with the like, separation from the like, sickness and death, birth, aging, death, birth, aging and death. It's going to be a great way to sharpen that insight into arising, ceasing, arising, ceasing, arising, ceasing. And so the uprooting the latent grasping that still exists after stream entry, some monks and nuns do review their past lives to deepen that insight. So.
Thank you, Ajahn. One more question. How difficult it is to get another human rebirth?
Lord Buddha says it's quite difficult. So one of the things he says is because we've all made good and bad karma, even if we keep the precepts and even if we're generous and even if we meditate, he said, it's a bit like throwing a stick up in the sky. You don't know which end of the stick is going to land when it hits the ground. So even for people who've been very, very careful, there's some possibility that you can still fall to a lower realm. So we really have to be heedful. And this is one of the reasons Asians make auspicious merits, releasing fish, releasing turtles, releasing eels. Because what happens is that fish is there kind of gasping, wants to be able to breathe, can't breathe. Put it in water, the fish feels like it can breathe. The crab with its claws tied up in twine feels terribly restrained. And you cut the twine and you release it back into the ocean and it feels a sense of release and relief and freedom. So a lot of people, when they're dying, have experience of not being able to breathe, have a feeling of being trapped, have a feeling of being in a lot of pain. So when we make these particular auspicious merits where we help fellow sentient beings to be relieved of feelings like that, then we're increasing the likelihood of having a serene and peaceful death without those feelings, because we've helped large numbers of beings to be liberated from those feelings. So it is, you look at it at a glance, it looks superstitious, it looks silly. When you really think about it, it's a very, very wise practice. We don't want to die feeling suffocated. We don't want to die feeling trapped. We do ideally hope to be able to move somewhat seamlessly from this life, but you need very particular auspicious merits to be able to do that. So we have to accumulate those merits. I know a woman, the same woman whose blessed Buddha statue grew relics, her father was an attendant of Lumpur Tate, and he'd gone to spend, after his retirement, some time with Lumpur Tate, and he was having tea with Lumpur Tate, and he passed away and collapsed on the lap of his Arahant teacher, just like that. And Lumpur Tate, because he'd been his attendant, Lumpur Tate arranged his funeral. So you can imagine how much merit that man had, drawing close to a great Ajahn, attending to that great Ajahn. He died in the Ajah's lap. And I asked Ajahn Anan, would he mind if I did that? And he scolded me. So he said that he should pass away before me, according to, and I should help arrange his funeral. And there was a Sri Lankan woman that went to make merit at Ajahn Kalyano's monastery to acknowledge the 1 year passing of her husband. And Ajahn Kalyano noticed, you're making merit for your husband passing away 1 year ago, but I just noticed that you don't seem sad. And he said, she said, no, I'm really confident that he went somewhere good. I said, well, why are you confident? And he said, well, we were having breakfast one morning and my husband was drinking tea, and he just looked skyward and he said, I can see Davis. And he put down his cup of tea and his chin fell on his chest and he passed away. And the Devas had obviously come to pick him up. So it is rare, but it is possible that one can move seamlessly and painlessly from this human birth if very auspicious merits are in place. So, yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn.
But many of us have killed chickens and caught fish and done all sorts of things in our past lives just to feed our families. And so we all have that. We all have those kind of karmas. So that's what Ajahn Achalo said, when people die painfully of cancer, it's usually related to having kept animals in pens and having wrung chickens' necks and clobbered fish on the head and all those things that people do to feed themselves. So yeah, if you can release animals who are suffering and make auspicious merits to support your peaceful death, I do recommend it. So
Yeah, so we should abstain from killing.
yeah.
Okay. So if someone asks if we have broken the precepts, so how can we remedy it so that we will not fall into the lower rebirths?
Yeah, so like I said, there's no guarantee, but what you can do is you can increase the probabilities. So the cultivation of metta, there is one sutta where Lord Buddha says that the practice of metta is the one condition most conducive to heavenly rebirth. So a diligent practice of metta bhavana will increase the likelihood of the mind having an upward trajectory a lot. So keeping the precepts strictly, being generous, meditating, but adding that metta practice, being really diligent in it. It's like if you'd sowed causes to be born in lower realms, then you need to get determined to sow causes to be born in higher realms. Metta, and then the mind which has metta will concentrate easily. Concentration produces great merit. And the thing that produces the most merit of all is the clear insight into impermanence. So if doing retreats and having vipassana insights does produce vast amounts of merit, which decreases the likelihood of being born in a lower realm. So
Thank you, Ajahn. We just have 2 more questions left. So the next question is there a difference between rebirth and reincarnation, or does it mean the same thing?
yeah, I think I answered that in that previous question. So ordinary beings with uncultivated minds will have a rebirth. The power of the types of karmas that they've made will just take over at that point, and the mind will go on a trajectory similar to what it's been on in most cases. But a being who's generated genuine spiritual power will begin to have more choice. That's reincarnation, when a being has enough spiritual faculties. But if you don't have really powerful spiritual faculties and you're thinking, I'm going to be reborn here, I'm going to be reborn that, that's just fantasy or wishful thinking. And I hope it works. But normally what happens at that point is there's a lot of confusion, a lot of pain, and habits take over, and the trajectory of the way you've lived your life will take you where you're going. It's like a train. This kind of freight train is just coming with all this momentum of a lifetime and the lifetimes before that's habits, and it's taking you to the next station. But if you develop genuine samadhi and you make auspicious merits and you make very clear aspirations repeatedly, then yes, then you get into the realm of being able to reincarnate specifically where you aspire to be.
Thank you, Ajahn. The last question. At the point of death, what is the most important factor that determines the next rebirth?
Yeah, so there are two. So there are two important factors. And what I was just saying, the general level on average of how you've lived your life, that's the freight train that's already roaring, that wants to take you to the next station. The other most important factor is the mind state at the moment of death. So and this is the thing, like even if you've been a really, really good person, if your mind falls to a heavy negative state at death, it's going to be difficult to have a human or heaven rebirth. And some other people might fluke as well. They might not have been particularly virtuous, but when they're dying, they remember a merit that they made, and they might actually go to a good rebirth, even though it wasn't very probable. But obviously, that would be a fluke. So it's really important that we do understand that keeping our precepts and doing our meditation regularly and our chanting all of these things are increasing the likelihood of an auspicious rebirth, that we're trying to keep our mind on a radiant, somewhat radiant state, or at least not a negative or dark state. And then this is one of the benefits of sitting regularly and sitting longer, is that you will have to practice with pain. And when you normally sit for 45 minutes and you decide you're going to sit for an hour, then you're going to get some experience of patiently enduring with painful feelings. And you will be able to develop more skill in separating the awareness of the feeling from the feeling. And you will develop skill at not adding mental suffering to the experience of pain in the body. And then, adding a couple of sessions a day. As people age, become semi-retired and retired, even though you have more pain in your body, you should sit with a certain amount of pain, not just do sitting in soft couches meditations and lying down on bed meditation. You should sit on a pillow and work with some pain, because this is what's going to make it possible, if there is some pain involved in your dying process, that you have trained your mind to be able to be aware of painful feelings without falling into hell about it, without adding aversion, fear, resentment to the experience of pain. But that takes practice. So it's one of the benefits of sitting, formal meditation posture, is that the patience that you develop by being patient with pain, you begin to be able to apply that patience in all sorts of other areas of your life. Somebody says something irritating, you have an unpleasant feeling. You can be patient with that feeling, you don't have to react. It's all that you're cultivating that capacity to be with irritation without being a slave to it, having to act on it. So many benefits of regular sitting and increasing the length of your sitting, and tremendous investment in your ability to die peacefully.
There's another question. Can Ajahn take one more question? One last question.
Yeah, last one. Yep.
Okay, this is from the floor. The volunteer is asking, when one is reborn well in a good mind state, would the dark karma that has not ripened will surface later?
Yeah, sure. That's the chant that we do. I am born of my karma, heir to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. So, Ajahn Achalo, I believe, is an enlightened master now. And he had malaria 5 times in his early years practicing at Wat Maptan, and it was very painful. But he also developed a lot of insight through it. About 7 or 8 years ago, Ajahn Achalo had low blood platelets, arrhythmia of the heart, high blood pressure. And if those things came together, it would have been possible that he could have lost his life quite early, at around 60. When I asked him, why are all these things affecting you all at once? And he said, well, part of it was how often I had malaria, and how I didn't really nourish my body very well as a young monk, because I was just determined in my practice. So, when he was a young monk at Ajahn Chah's monastery, if he had greed arise for his food in his bowl that day, he pushed away his bowl and didn't eat. It's like, he was training himself to uproot and weaken the last of the greed. But the body got a little bit malnourished. And he didn't care. He was experiencing Upajjhara Samadhi for periods of months. He was getting, when his jhana came back, it was a higher jhana. He was experiencing great mental power and joy, but it affected the body. And then I asked him, well, what, partly the malnourishment, partly the result of systemic malaria that isn't treated properly, or that keeps coming back. And then part of it was he said in past lives he was a soldier, he killed many people. And so even for someone who has liberated their mind from the conditions, the body is still a condition, it's still in the conditioned world, and the karmas that person made in their past life. So this is one of the reasons that many great monks, when they become about 60, build big chetties, because building a chetty increases lifespan. It's one of the merits of building a chetty. So Ajahn Mahabua, even these monks who've been very austere and very simple, when they get to 65, 70, they'll all of a sudden build some whopping, great, big, beautiful chetty. That there'll be all the gold and the diamonds and the money, and it's like all this kind of abundance comes. So it's a bit confusing. Like, how's this monk that's been so austere and aloof and not interested in these things all of a sudden has safes full of precious items, but which they've received to be enshrined. It makes very specific merit. So when Ajahn Mahabua allowed a big chetty to be built, he did end up living, I think, more than 10 years after his colon cancer. Similar with Ajahn Dan. Ajahn Dan had colon cancer. He had it treated. He built a really big chetty. He's still with us a good number of years later. Ajahn Anan, around 60, started to build his big chetty. And once he got the foundations for the chetty in and some structure, and his health started to improve. And you meet with medicines that are effective, etc., etc. So, yes, so even the great, there was a sutta where Lord Buddha had some backaches and Ananda is massaging him, and it was a result of karma. There was another sutta where Lord Buddha wanted a drink of water and some horses had gone through and muddied up all the water, and Ananda had gone to get the water. It wasn't clear. He came back. Lord Buddha was thirsty. So even the Buddha, imagine hundreds of thousands of lives of accumulating merit. But before that, there were the lives where he made bad karma. And so even in his final life, as the all-knowing transcendent one, he still has negative karmas that he produced, who knows how many thousands of eons ago, ripening in his life. So yes, we can't escape the consequences of bad karma if we are still in cyclic existence. That's why we really do need to be heedful to make, if you know that something is bad karma and you're still doing it, you really do need to meditate on this. Like, you're the one that's going to suffer in the future because of it. So be careful. As a gift to yourself, out of kindness to yourself, please stop doing this. But of course, the more merit that we can add to the situation, when we meet with difficult situations, if we've made vast merits, then people will help us through that situation. I had the experience when I was trying to get, many people know I made a vow to do 3,000 hours of meditation in Bodhgaya, and I updated that vow. I want to do 4,000. And so about 2 years ago, 18 months ago, I had to come back to Thailand to do a visa, and then I was going back now. There's basic understanding in Thailand of, if you do a project that creates enormous merit, like if you built an uposatha hall, if you're an abbot, or if you build a chetty, it's kind of like folklore, or that you should leave the monastery for at least 6 months, because it's basically understood that something will happen to you. You've made such vast merits, you need to like duck or get out of the way for a while. And so what was happening was, because I had a visa and I had to come back and I needed to check in on the abbot who was taking care of the monastery for me, I was just in the monastery for a week. And I'd been meditating for 8 hours a day in Bodhgaya, and I was going back. It was very cold, could only do 8 hours a day. I was going back and I was hoping to do 10 hours a day. And I ended up injuring myself. I was in the monastery for 1 week. I've lived in this monastery for 10 years. I never injured myself, but I'd finished the chetty, we'd enshrined the relics. The people had put up some scaffolding, and they'd put this particular metal peg into the concrete road that stood up just a couple of inches. And it was literally in the middle of the path, and it was holding a frame on a diagonal. So for what I could see was these diagonals, and I was kind of on autopilot probably, but I'll just give you a glimpse of what I was doing. I had some beads in my hand as I was walking. I was with Buddha. I was synchronizing Buddha with the beads and with my footsteps. I was looking at the top of the chetty, at the parasol thing on top of the chetty with the jewels and the gold, and I was noticing how beautiful it was reflecting in the afternoon light. And the thought that I had was, I'm going to go and get a bigger size mala, come back and do walking meditation next to the chetty. So I don't know if you get much more wholesome mind state, but my left foot, which had thick sandals, left foot hit the first peg. My body started thrusting forward. I quickly moved my right foot forward to stabilize myself. The shoe flew off my foot. I put my foot down with all my force, and the foot landed on the next metal peg. And it went in about 3 centimeters. We're talking about corrugated iron, rusty corrugated iron. So I was wearing thick sandals. I was with a mala. I was reciting Buddha. I was looking at a chetty. My mind was experiencing appreciative consciousness. And I seriously injured myself. Now, I can also see that a certain amount of merit was taking care of me, because when I went to the hospital and they said, Ajahn, we can't do stitches. This is just mush. We have to gouge it out. It's a hole. You're going to have to wait for this hole to grow back from the bottom up. And you're going to have to clean it every day for the next month. So whatever. What's very interesting is 10 days later, I was back in Bodhgaya, according to my plan. Every single step that I took really hurt. But there had been no nerve damage, there had been no ligament damage, there had been no bone damage. It had only affected soft tissue and it grew back. And what's really interesting is it didn't hurt when I was meditating. So I was able to do my 8, 9, 10 hours a day of meditation. When I got up to go to the bathroom, when I had to walk back to the guest house, every step hurt. But after about 3 weeks, it had grown back, grew back quite quickly. But I could see myself there, you see. When you make a lot of good karma quickly, some bad karma is coming. It's just coming. It's gonna get you. But if you have supportive merits, it won't be too bad, and you'll be able to continue doing the auspicious things that you're doing without too much obstruction. So, yes.
Thank you, Ajahn, for sharing. We are really grateful to have you here, especially we know that you are really very busy as an abbot at Anandagiri. So thank you so much for coming in tonight. Shall we say sadhu 3 times?
Sadhu,
Sadhu,
sadhu, sadhu.
Let's pay respects to Ajahn. First bow. Second bow. Third bow.
I'm happy to spend time with you, encouraging you in your practice, and I would like to wish you every success. May we all continue to grow in Buddha Dhamma, grow steadily in our mindfulness, wisdom, concentration, and uproot and transcend those kilesas. Cultivate the wholesome conditions that lead to the unconditioned. May you all experience Nibbana swiftly.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Sadhu,
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 sadhu.
Take care.
Thank you, Ajahn.
We will now invite all the sentient beings to participate in our acquired merits for cultivating the wholesome thoughts, wholesome speech, and wholesome actions this morning. Let us now chant together. Etawata cha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe dewa anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etawata cha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etawata ca amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. The dedication of merits to our departed relatives, let us chant together. Idang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
We hope that you have enjoyed the talk. Next week, we have our esteemed speaker, Sister Sylvia Bay, who will be giving a talk titled The Deeper Meaning Behind Going to the Triple Gem for Refuge. Do stay tuned to our talk. See you next Sunday.